How would you like some more Ohio State offensive line conversation? We've got it covered for you.
Yeah.
Like it or not, here it is on Snap Judgments. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Ryan Day looking for some knock 'em back, rocking off the ball, hard-hitting offensive line play on Saturday. Ohio State needs it. No finalized plans. So even though we saw one snap on Tuesday, still working through that three-man rotation, which includes left and right with the swing guard, Austin Sareveld. So that's the update on the personnel there, is that there is no definitive update.
No, but it is at least different. Talking about rotating Sareveld between both positions is different. It's really about perspective, I guess, and personality when you're talking about what Ryan Day was describing on Wednesday. Like he said, we may miss on some swings, but it's not going to be from a lack of aggression. And to me, that is a not so thinly veiled shot / comment directly at Tegra Shabola, who has been passive in pass protection and in the screen game, as Bobby Carpenter talked about over and over on in the last few weeks when you're talking about the draw play against Michigan, the missed opportunity there. It's just the issues with Tegra Shabola have seemed to be from a lack of aggression. And I don't think you have to worry about that with guys like Austin Sareveld and Luke Montgomery. So you're just trying to find the best rotation. Again, no one thinks that rotating offensive linemen, I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable there. No one thinks that rotating offensive linemen is the right decision, I don't think. But it is the one you have, and so what else can you do?
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out if that's the best decision. Well, you just can't
get nailed down and say, well, we're not going to play Tegra, we're going to play these two.
Yeah. Well,
and then if they come out and don't play well, then what?
I think that's the difference, is that normally when we would ask an Ohio State coach, Ryan Day, Justin Fry, Chip Kelly, anybody else about rotating, it feels like it is by design. It's going to happen at this time, this amount of snaps, and we still see that from time to time with the way that Larry Johnson manages the defensive line. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But if you pin yourself into that, I do think that this is a game where they're going to have to be able to adjust on the fly and able to adjust quickly, because we've seen them go through entire halves where it's like, okay, well, this can stay a close game. They're going to dominate the third quarter after they get into the locker room and make some adjustments. I get that. In a playoff game, in a talent-equated situation, I'm not sure that is prudent. This is a one-game season at this point.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a very simple decision. If you're starting Luke Montgomery at left guard and you're starting Tegra Shabola at right guard, which I think we agree will probably be what happens. If that first quarter is not going well for Luke, then you bring in Austin Sareveld. If it's not going well for Tegra, then you bring in Austin Sareveld. Yeah. Like, I don't think it's a situation where you go into this saying we're going to rotate no matter what. I think we're going to rotate if the situation calls for it and if we are given a reason to. And certainly over the last month with Tegra Shabola especially, we can't really talk about Luke or Austin Sareveld that way because we haven't seen them play very much. We have seen a lot more of Tegra, so the data points are much more multiple, much more available. And so I don't think you go into this going, well, no matter what, here we're going to rotate. We're going to rotate. You're going to do what the situation calls for. And the Ryan Day motto for the last 2.5 weeks has been whatever it takes. And so it's not an ideal situation, but if that's what it takes, then so be it.
So that's for the current offensive line, which is playing on Saturday in the college football playoff against Tennessee, Saturday night, 8 p.m. They've also built for the future, Berm.
Added offensive lineman Phillip Daniels from Minnesota. Started 4 games for the Gophers as a redshirt freshman this year. He's from Cincinnati. He's a cousin of Paris Johnson. So very familiar with Ohio State, a player from Cincinnati Princeton High School. Buckeyes camped with him multiple times when he was in high school. Really, I asked Ryan Day about it, like, is this the recipe you want? A kid from Ohio who maybe you were on the fence about. I think Ohio State should have offered him in high school. I've said that before. Said it a couple of years ago when they decided to take Miles Walker instead of Phillip Daniels. I thought it was a mistake then. But now you get a second chance, and that's the beauty of the transfer portal when it comes to kids from Ohio who's gone to the Big Ten, played well, and shown that he could make an impact. And it wasn't I'm going to Ohio State. Ohio State had to make some decisions here quickly because Auburn and Alabama and other schools were offering him a lot of money because 3 years of eligibility for a proven starter in the Big Ten that is rare. So it's a big win for Ohio State. You can pretty much pencil him in as the starting right tackle next season for the Buckeyes. So that it's very important that you get that done. But you wish you had him play. You wish you could play him this Saturday.
Could be helpful, yeah. So it's rare and it's also expensive, and that's why these things get complicated. Ohio State has spread a pretty decently wide net, at least reaching out. Maybe not offering every single player out there, but at least engaging them in conversation, extending some offers, having some visits. They had to get multiple tackles. They have one now, and that could maybe narrow the focus or at least allow them to determine how much more resources to allocate. And you were having that conversation with Ryan Day earlier in here on Wednesday. It's like, what's the right path forward? Because the offensive line conversation may have to be different than every other position on the roster, given the length of development and other programs. Let's say even ones that, prospects that may have been involved with both Ohio State and Tennessee. Does it make sense, even if they are generational prospects, to pay 7 figures for an 18-year-old offensive lineman, knowing that it may take 2 or 3 years until they're ready? Like this could, you still have to recruit and you still have to develop.
Yeah.
But this could be the sweet spot where you are getting 1 or 2 or 3 year college veteran offensive lineman that's different than the approach they've taken at wide receiver or corner or whatever.
Ryan Day brought up the NFL and how the value is getting a guy in their second contract in most cases. Yeah, you have your first round picks, you have your Jeremiah Smiths of the world, but generally speaking, if you're getting a guy in his second contract, you're getting the best of him. And it's even on the other side. He didn't mention it, but the other side of that is that if you bring in a guy who's a fifth-year player, you get a guy 1 year before he retires, and it may be nice to fill a hole, but it's not going to help you build your franchise or your program long term. Ohio State, you're referencing David Sanders specifically, talking about Tennessee. That money that it would have taken to sign David Sanders, which is obviously a really good player and a guy that is going to be an NFL first-round pick in 3 years, much like I was very confident Paris Johnson would be. That's what David Sanders is going to be. Mm-hmm. But Ohio State may be able to get 3 potential starters in the offensive line for that same amount of money for next year and 2 years down the road. So, it pisses people off, and you can understand why people expect Ohio State to be dominant at the high school level. And Ryan Day said, that is still how you're building the program. But 100% the offensive line is different. I mean, you have to have guys who can play. And even if find pictures of Philip Daniels from the summer of 2022, when he camped at Ohio State, and compared to now, he was 6'5", 270 pounds then. Now he's 6'5", 315, and he looks like a grown-ass man. It's not the same. And there's an offensive lineman on campus right now as we're recording this. I'm not going to put his name out there because it's not been public, and it's not my place to tell people if he hasn't announced it himself. But there's another Ethan Onyanwa who's from Rice, visiting Texas A&M tomorrow and Friday, and I think a decision from him will come this weekend. And if Ohio State can bring in Philip Daniels and Onyanwa and the kid that's here now, you have 3 potential starters, and that's necessary, number one, because of the shortcomings that they've had in high school recruiting, but it's also much more valuable long-term than signing one guy.
Yeah, I think maybe my answer to this would not be the same every single year, but for the current situation and the makeup of this Ohio State roster, I think it was far more important for Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Justin Fry to win the transfer portal battle on the offensive line, much more so than it was high school recruiting.
Yeah, in an ideal world, you'd have enough money to do both, or there'd be some structure in place to prevent the incoming freshman contracts from being so obscene. But this isn't in an ideal world, so you have to make some changes. And Ohio State certainly would have signed David Sanders and been happy about it. Yeah. They would have still been in the position where they had to find a guy or two, and then you stretch your budget. So it's not to absolve any issues they've had with high school recruiting, because clearly they're not signing enough guys in that spot. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to sign 3 offensive linemen in the transfer portal every year. But here you are. So now you have to make the best of it.
All right, that's offensive line conversation. Feels wrong to do it without Bill. Did you learn anything else about the matchup on Saturday night?
Not really the matchup, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. Yesterday at practice, when we had a 15-minute window, I saw, and I told you and Bill how weird it was, I saw Ryan Day and Brian Hartline laughing and seeming to have...
Are you having fun out there?
Seeming to have a good time. There's our offensive lineman right there who's visiting. We're not going to turn the camera. They were having fun, and I felt a little bit of a different Ryan Day on Wednesday. It just seemed, I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
Peach Bowl Ryan Day.
If Ohio State is not aggressive on Saturday, I will be stunned. I will be absolutely shocked if they don't come out and throw haymakers as much as they can. Now, maybe they're not going to connect on them all like he said, but I don't get the sense that this is a team or a coaching staff that feels like there's any value to playing it close to the vest on Saturday. And what you have to do as a fan, and this is me speaking as a fan, like if you go out and you take your best swings and you lose, so what? I mean, it sucks. You're in the playoff. You're going to run into good teams. I'm not going to say it's not going to hurt people. It's not going to be upsetting, but like at least you can feel like you walked away with taking your best shot, because we know that that's not what happened against Michigan. And
I think that's what's so befuddling.
Yeah,
but I guess
that's why it's so hard to get over that.
Yeah. Like at some point, whatever mental hurdle, mental block is in the way, you'd love to see Ryan Day. You'd love to see Ryan Day get past that when it comes to Michigan specifically. But 9 times out of 10, or even more than 9 times out of 10, you have not seen him coach against anybody else with any of that sort of fear of repercussions. And sometimes when he's talking about go out there and let it loose and don't worry about what might happen, the consequences, the person who may need to hear that more than anyone else is not necessarily the roster. It may be him. And if he plays or coaches with that mantra in his mind on Saturday, which again, he did against Georgia, it wasn't a win. It was one of the best losses in school history, but the way that they coached against Clemson before that, which was, well, what's it going to take to win? How about going up-tempo nonstop and not letting Clemson adjust and going, muddle huddle, sugar huddle, whatever. Like, those have been the performances where you just knew that he was coaching as if he did not care what happened. And we have not always seen that, and we certainly didn't see it 3 weeks ago. But if that is the internal message that he is also then giving externally to the team, I agree with you completely. I would be stunned if they didn't take their shots. And it goes into what I talked about with the game plan and the offensive line. Like, you are going to have to come up with something creative and something aggressive to account for that. Maybe this forces them to do it in a way as well that they could have done anyway, but now they have no choice.
Did you get the sense that he was leaning at all into the run the ball no matter what philosophy?
There was a time in the press conference where I was a little bit concerned about what I was hearing.
Because there was at least a moment where you're like, you can see him still reverting to that. We have to run the ball. We have to, and I think maybe...
Well, he said you can't just run on the perimeter for the whole game long. And I thought, well, maybe just do that first.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about yesterday. I'm not sure I don't know that you can run on the perimeter against Tennessee. I think if you're going to run against them, it's going to have to be in the middle. So it does put the onus on the offensive line guys we've already talked about. But I think people are going to hear his press conference, which is on our YouTube channel if you haven't seen it already, and get worried that maybe there's going to be some of that stubbornness that he exhibited in the Michigan game. And I'm hoping...
It sounded like he was working his way through it, in real time.
That's what I'm saying. I think he's trying to find a way to convey that as a philosophy and as an attitude and not a game plan, because if it's the game plan, then everything we just said in the last 3 minutes is moot, because then that's not being aggressive.
And it might not be enough to beat Tennessee. I do think that's the key point, is that he should not be conveying a message to Luke Montgomery, Tiger Shabola, or Austin Sareveld that they cannot win one-on-one matchups, that they cannot run the football in that direction. As a coaching staff, they may well be aware of some limitations, that they can't ask them to do that 15 or 20 or 25 times, and that you can let them do other things.
You have to convince these 3 guys, you are more than capable of running the ball up the middle against these guys. We can do this. But at the same time, put together a game plan that highlights your strengths and masks your perceived deficiency/weakness in that spot. So it's always hard to tell in these press conferences what's being said for public consumption, what's being said to send a message internally, what's being said to convince Ryan Day of something himself. And so we're trying to always parse through that. But I do feel like what we heard from him today was the more aggressive version of Ryan Day in just a press conference setting. And I don't know that I don't think you're going to disagree, right? Like, he just seemed.
I think they're ready, and I think you noticed that on Tuesday. Like, maybe he'll show up after leaving Skull Session on Saturday night and ask if you're scared. And
I don't think you'll see me. I'll be wearing a lot of layers. It's not going to be indoors in the Mercedes-Benz Dome.
But this Woody Wednesday conversation is the last one that Ryan Day will have before Saturday in prime time, at least with the local media. I'm sure that he'll appear on game day and wherever else that everybody in the world is coming into this game. So there's still some responsibilities left, but that is the last full press conference for Ryan Day.
Buy tickets, folks.
Prices are going down.
Prices are getting lower. If you're on the fence, go buy tickets. Maybe you'll see one of the best wins in Ohio State history. Maybe you'll get to see Ryan Day's last game if that's what you want, to be the person who wants to root against that, his long-term success for whatever reason. At least you'll have a memory, right? With your family. And that's what matters. Also, download the Buckeyes app, because I think they're going to use that for the light show at halftime. So make sure if you are going to the game that you've already downloaded that, because it's hard to download stuff once you get into the stadium.
All right. Last press conference done. Last snap judgments until post-game on Saturday is done. But we still have so much more. We have 3 Thoughts Thursday on the podcast daily. We are going to be at the Fairway Columbus for a playoff kickoff on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. Come hang out with us. Berm, Bill, myself, Zach Bourne, and Michael Bennett. Pumped to get back out there at the Fairway again for another show. And bold predictions on Friday. Pre-game keys. Like, there's still Kings of Columbus. There's still so much more coming as we get ready for the college football playoff first round game at the Horseshoe, Ohio State and Tennessee. Saturday night, 8 p.m. We know you won't miss it. He's Berm. I'm Austin. Thanks for joining us on Snap Judgments. We'll see you.